Japan's economy has actually failed to grow as much as expected in the second quarter, and this is fueling speculation that the government may have to delay new consumption tax hikes. But overall, the government of Shinzo Abe is said to be performing well since having taken power, and the policy of Abenomics has promoted growth in the past 3 quarters. And sustaining that economic growth is the key to unlocking Abe's proposed constitutional changes, as Tony Chang reports in the last of a series on Japan's move to the right.
The land of the rising sun is asserting itself once again. A new government with a new message, and the possibility of an end to Japan's pacifist constitution. Over the course of the next week, we'll be taking a closer look at the rise of the right wing in Japanese politics, the possible constitutional changes that could lead to a return for a proper Japanese military, what ordinary Japanese people think about all of these changes, and whether this is a real risk to regional security in East Asia. It was a stunning turnaround at the polls. Having been unceremoniously kicked out by voters 4 years ago, the LDP and its leader Shinzo Abe have now taken the upper and the lower houses of the Japanese Diet. The LDP had campaigned hard on a platform of constitutional change. They promised to restore national pride and Japan's military. And since taking power, they refused to back down against China and Korea in territorial disputes. But is that actually what the voters wanted? Some analysts feel the constitutional reforms are an afterthought, that most people voted for strong economic leadership.
The LDP won the victory not because of the political stance, but because of the economic policy.
Thus far, it's worked. Mr. Abe has reformed the Bank of Japan, brought down the value of the yen and pushed the economy back into growth for the first time in a decade. And the policy of Abenomics, as it's become known, is taking on Japan's famous bureaucracy. Even Mr. Abe's political opponents are on board. The Restoration Party, also in agreement on the constitutional reform, is keen to introduce changes.
We have to trust more in the power of the private sector, so that they can operate more freely, and we strongly believe we have to remove the bureaucratic regulations.
But while the domestic economy is doing well, trade with neighbours is not. The recent territorial disputes are estimated to have cost Japan billions of dollars in lost trade. The improvements in Japan's economy over the past 8 months have benefited Shinzo Abe enormously at the opinion polls. But if relations with China and Korea continue to deteriorate, it'll be very serious for the long-term future of the Japanese economy. But Mr. Abe is unlikely to be swayed. His legacy will be constitutional change, and economic success is the way to sell it to voters.
Constitutional reform is this sacred trust. So that is what is driving him. That is his ends, and Abenomics is the means to that, those ends.
And Abenomics can only do so much. So far it's provided stimulus, but questions remain over its ability to sustain long-term growth.
It's the third plan. The previous 2 have failed, and the current one is looking a little bit wobbly at present.
Shinzo Abe faces challenges in the next few years with a new consumption tax and massive cuts needed to public spending. But in order to maintain public support for his constitutional changes, he'll have to ensure his economic performance stays on track. Tony Chang, CCTV, Tokyo.